Joining me, consulting editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the journalist and broadcaster, Sam Dowler. Sam, thanks for joining us. Do appreciate it and appreciate your efforts in trying to hold up this end of the argument. It does seem odd, it certainly seems odd to me that I can get on the underground and share my exhalations with dozens of other people, then I get to the theatre and I've got to put one on, and I've got some sympathy, as I think many of our viewers have, with that Ron DeSantis quote there. Enough of the theatre already. Just take them off.
Well, first of all, Ron DeSantis certainly knows a thing or two about theatre. That's basically his whole MO at the moment. I mean, he's also backing a controversial proposal that would strip $200 million of education funding from Democratic counties that defied his executive order last year banning mask mandates.
We'll address the question. Come on.
So, okay, well, so basically, I would say that it was a personal preference. I understand. I mean, in a scenario like a theatre, you don't have to be there. You're there because you want to. You're there by choice. If certain theatres want you to wear a mask, but as you quite rightly said, you don't have to. You don't have to wear a mask on the tube. You don't have to wear a mask in the supermarket. If people feel comfortable wearing one, then so be it. Let them do it. Don't tell them off and say it's ridiculous and it's theatre. That's a bit silly, really.
Andrew.
Well, it is theatrical, and I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the advice from the World Health Organization was these masks don't do any good. And then they decided we did need to wear them. So what's changed? And not the science, in my view. The idea was that masks were seen as quite an effective way of government being able to show we are doing something. And my point now is I think we've become completely dependent on the state. What does the state tell us to do? What have we got to think? I know, let's get a government to tell us. I saw an MP in the House of Commons the other day at Prime Minister's Questions spluttering and muttering through her mask and she was asking questions. I couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. Why was she wearing a mask when around her there were 400 MPs who weren't? Because she was virtue signalling too. I'm sick of it. I'm bored with it. If I go to the theatre and they insist on I'm wearing a mask, of course I wear a mask, but you can be absolutely certain when that light goes down it slips, because it is about virtue signalling. Now, on the tube, I've been using the tube for years, nobody was wearing a mask, even before the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, finally woke up. Nobody was wearing it. Not many. I tell you who weren't wearing them in particular, Transport for London staff. Not that you can get on a tube today, don't get me started on that, because they're on strike again, and why are they doing the strike? So I think people are fed up. Can we just rely on the great British virtue of common sense, which is where we do agree, because it should be down to the individual. If you want to wear one, good. But don't try and bully the rest of us.
So I'm down to the individual, but we need to consider things which I think sometimes are overlooked. I mean, I did a monologue a few months ago based on some figures that were released and actually I think were completely ignored, but I felt they told a story, and the story was about stalking. The number of people who have used the cover of the camouflage, of the disguise, of the face mask to stalk people.
Awful.
There is people think it's sort of epidemiologically neutral. Maybe they stop the spread of, maybe not. But actually, there is no downside. There is a downside. And it's not just the downside of, kids in classrooms not being able to see, not developing their speech properly because they can't see the lips of the teacher. It's things like stalking, as serious as that.
Well, I think the time of wearing masks in the classrooms, etc., is pretty much over. But of course, and I agree with you, I mean, if you're going to use a mask for crime, then clearly, I mean, basically, masks are part of our day-to-day life now. And if you wear it, I remember years ago when you'd see somebody on the tube and you'd be like, oh, they've got a mask on, how funny. Whereas nowadays, it's part of the course. I mean, I have one with me, and I was on the tube yesterday, and I didn't use it because I didn't really feel like it. But the point is, I mean, I agree with you with the stalking thing, because I remember, at some point in the pandemic, with a hat on, sunglasses and a mask, and you could be anybody, couldn't you? So yeah, I think because masks are part of life now, whether you want to wear one or not, it's just something that we're going to have to live with, really. And to the point about the MP wearing it in the House of Commons, I do think, obviously, I don't know whether that's because, she might be immunocompromised, I don't know, but also at the same time, if nobody else is wearing it, then, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, isn't it, which is slightly ridiculous.
Andrew, Sam contends they have become a constant now for some people. They're just part of the warp and weft of daily life. We'll just have to get used to it, like Japan.
I can remember when I went to Singapore on a story about 10 years ago. If you went into a shopping mall, everybody wore masks and there were dispensers to clean your hands. And that's the way it is. It is a peculiarly Far East thing. And we always saw people of Chinese descent often on tubes wearing masks. But I don't think it has become... I think for a while you thought your keys, your money, your mask. But I think now people are feeling liberated to get rid of these wretched things. And I read only the other day, the mask I was wearing during the pandemic did me absolutely no good whatsoever. So what was the point? It was virtue signaling. It was to enable the government to look like they were making people do their will. Stop telling us what...
Well, I think the mask was, I mean, as opposed to doing you any good, the mask was to protect other people from you. So we were all to wear the masks. So basically, so our germs wouldn't get spread. No, but so that our germs wouldn't spread to other people.
You don't need to be protected from me, Sam. I'm not that. I don't bite.
Especially not if you've got a mask on now.
We agree to some degree that this is something which Omicron turned out to be very transmissible, but mercifully not particularly lethal. So we move beyond that. We move into that post-COVID era. Does somebody need to issue a diktat and say, guys, no more face masks? Let's get on. There are some downsides, or should we rely? Let me just make this point. Should we rely, Sam, on this idea of respectability? Because I've got a feeling, call it a hope, that in a fortnight or so, people will start to wake up to the fact that actually the only people really left wearing masks, say, outside, are people who don't really want to be identified, at which point it will become bad manners to wear one.
I mean, they've already said that, that you don't have to wear one at all. I mean, there's no mask mandate in this country anymore, which I think is a good thing. Like, if you want to wear one, you can wear one. I don't think there will ever be a time where it's where people think, oh, you're trying to hide your face. I think because, often now most of the people that I see wearing masks, especially in the supermarket, are older people. And if it makes them feel comfortable to wear a mask when they're out, I mean, whether they listen to the news or not, or then be that as it may, and they should be able to be allowed to do so without people thinking it was an old lady on the run.
Yes, you can, Andrew.
But can I just say on this, and the people who said we should wear masks were the modellers who said that Omicron was going to kill up to 6,000 people a day. The total never rose above 300. They got it spectacularly wrong on that, and they should apologise for it. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister saw them off and didn't take us into another lockdown. But he was under a lot of pressure from the Labour benches to do so, and he stuck it out. And he said at the time then, you can get rid of your mask, and you can. And it's liberating, trust me.
Andrew, I didn't express myself very well. Just on the point about respectability, yeah. I prefer the idea, rather than expecting government to regulate and codify our lives, that for the wisdom of crowds to start to work, and we together decide, actually, that we don't really need them. We shouldn't have to be told. We should actually come to that realisation, the majority of us, I think. And again, accepting, Sam, totally, that if some people want to keep on wearing them, when they're in a car on their own, when they're asleep, it doesn't matter. That's their choice. But we shouldn't have a situation, I think, where I went to a theatre this week in London and I was expected to wear a wretched mask.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, I recently went on a flight and I had to wear a mask for the full 9 hours, which was awful, but and even if you touched your mask at all or moved it other than eating, then they would come and tell you off. So I think maybe in the theatre, obviously it'll be down to each individual theatre. I don't know what they have to do in the cinema at the moment, for example, but it's like your guest said, like he would pull it down as soon as the lights went down, and that's understandable.
But Sam's just said you keep your mask on the plane until you eat. So then you take your mask off, you're eating, and you're coughing and spluttering, and the food's going away, and then you put your mask back on. What was the point of that?
And this is what Ron DeSantis was saying, wasn't it? He was approaching the podium, and there's these people, just for the benefit of the cameras, who were there with their masks on, and it was...
You get your free cup of tea from British Airways, so they all take their masks so they can nosh their free food and drink, and then the mask goes back on. Madness. Stupid. Pointless. He's right, that senator.
Andrew, for now, and Sam Dowler, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks for your perspective.
Thank you.